Are you a tourist planning to come to the Philippines soon? Or an expat who has been working and living in the Philippines for quite some time now? Hi, I'm Christine, and I've been teaching the Filipino language for more than 10 years now. Welcome to my channel, Learn to Speak Filipino for Tourists and Expats. Magandang umaga! Ako si Christine. I just introduced myself in Filipino. Ako si Christine. That means I'm Christine. Ako is the Filipino pronoun for I. Si is the Filipino marker that is used before the proper name of a person. After knowing your name, we Filipinos become more curious about you and interested in where you come from. Let me tell you first where I come from. Taga, Philippines ako. I am from the Philippines. Or Taga, Manila ako. I am from Manila. Taga is the expression that you put before the name of a place to express where you're from. To make all those expressions clearer, let me share my screen with you.
When you introduce yourself in Filipino saying your name, okay, you use the line, Ako si Christine. So the expression, Ako si Christine, means I am Christine in English. Okay? So when you use the pronoun ako, this pronoun, okay, ako is a pronoun and it is the equivalent of I in English. So when you use ako, that means I. Okay? Now, after the pronoun ako, you follow it with si. This one. Si is a nuance of the Filipino language and it is used as a marker that the next word is the proper name of a person. So when you use the proper name of a person in Filipino, you use the marker C. So the marker C is always placed before the name, the proper name of a person. So C, the marker C is used before the proper name of a person. Okay, so when you use your name or my name here, when I use my name Christine is a proper name. So I have to use the marker C in the when I introduce myself using my name. So ako si Christine. So let's move on to the next slide so you can practice using your name. So the pronoun ako, si, follow it with your name. So one more time, ako, si, and then follow it with your name. So when you introduce yourself in Filipino using your name, the more Filipinos become curious about you and where you come from. So the next part of your introduction, as I have mentioned, is to tell them where you come from. Okay, so I said, Taga Philippines ako. I am from the Philippines. So let us now focus our attention to the affix Taga. Okay? So Taga, the affix Taga, is placed before the name of a place. So the name of a place, like Philippines, could be a proper noun, or the name of a place could be a common noun, a common name of a place. But to express where you come from, then you use Taga, okay, the affix Taga. Now, it could mean, the affix Taga could mean from, okay, because Taga Philippines, from the Philippines. Okay, so Taga Philippines ako. I am from the Philippines. That means my home country is the Philippines, or I came from the Philippines. So let's move on to the next slide so you can practice expressing where you come from. So you see Taga and then where you come from. So for example, you come from France, then you say Taga France ako. So for example, you come from Japan. Okay? So you can say Taga Japan ako. Notice again that we use the pronoun ako, which means I am from, and then the country where you come from or your home country. Now, the next part of the lesson about Taga, or expressing where you come from, is to understand the context on how to use Taga. Taga can be used together with different places depending on the context. So for example, when I said Taga Philippines ako, the context of the conversation is that the people who are talking come from different countries. So this is always the first two lines. So this is one of the two lines that my basic Filipino students or my students in my basic Filipino classes always learn. And this is the first day of the session, the first day of class. So they learn to say ako, si, and then their name, and then they tell me where they come from. So they learn to see Taga, and then the country where they come from, ako. So since you're watching this video, and I am assuming you are from another part of the globe or from another country, the context then of Taga in this part is the people talking come from different countries. So if all of us in the room, or all of us here now watching this video, all of you watching this video, we come from different countries, then we will say Taga and then the country where you come from, okay? Or your home country. So if you're an expat in the Philippines, then you will say, for example, you come from Italy, then you say Taga Italy ako. Or if you come from Germany, then you can say Taga Germany ako. So another context, this is one of the contexts. So people from different countries, okay, are learning how to speak Filipino and to introduce themselves, then they say Taga, and then followed by the country where they come from. So let's see another context of Taga, okay, which we use together with our fellow Filipinos. So if I'm introducing myself together with fellow Filipinos, okay, I will also use Taga, but I will follow it with either a city, like Manila is a city, okay, or a province. So, for example, Taga Manila ako. I'm speaking with, I am in a group speaking with fellow Filipinos. Okay, so we're all from the Philippines. So when we talk about where we come from, we specify the city or the province or the place in the Philippines where you come from. So I can say, I am from Manila. So Taga Manila ako. Now, those, for example, who are from Cebu can see after Taga, they will say Cebu. I am from Cebu, so Taga, and then exchange Manila to Cebu. Taga Cebu ako. So if you're familiar with a province, for example, like Bulacan or Laguna, so you can say Taga. One of us is from Laguna, then I can say Laguna is a province, so I can say Taga Laguna ako. Or another person probably came from Bulacan, so he can say Taga Bulacan ako. So you can also say, for example, Taga Mindanao. Mindanao is an island, is one of the biggest group of islands in the Philippines, so you can say Taga Mindanao ako. So if you want to be particular in Mindanao, then if you come from Davao, then you could say Taga Davao ako. Okay, so we already had two contexts. One from people speaking, coming from people having the conversation, coming from different countries. The second part are um, Filipinos with fellow Filipinos. Okay, so we move on to another context. Again, how to use Taga with other places. This time, we look into um, other places like, for example, where you live. So the specific place where you live. So um, you can see, for example, uh, in the Philippines, you live in Makati. No? So different residences, workplaces where you work, a company, institution, or establishment where you work, or organization. Okay, so taga can also be followed by different workplaces. It could be specific. So, for example, or your residence. For example, you live in Makati or in BGC here at the Philippines. So you could say taga Makati ako, or you can say taga BGC ako. An example of a workplace or an institution could be here. Okay, could be a bank. Okay, bangko. So you can say taga bangko ako. Or for example, you can see if you work in the if you if you work in, for example, in the government, then you can say taga gobierno. Gobierno is government. Or in Filipino, government is taga pamahalaan. Okay? Taga pamahalaan. From government, from the government. Okay? So now, an example of a workplace or a company, workplace, specifically a company. Okay? So, taga Mitsubishi ako. Okay? So, taga Mitsubishi Corporation ako. You can say that, no? So, moving on. Okay? So, if you are in the same organization, so you can say taga accounting ako. Or you can say taga sales ako. Or taga marketing ako. The last concept, taga is also used by students, okay, or when we're talking about schools and universities. Okay? So in the Philippines, when students gather or when they are um, workers or colleagues who gather and then they talk about the university or school where they graduated from. Okay? So it can also be that taga is used to express what school you come from. So if it's a gathering of students, then they will see when they introduce themselves, they will specify the school where they come from. So for my example, okay, I am from De La Salle, so I can say taga De La Salle ako. Okay, so the other universities or schools, you can say, for example, for those who come from the University of the Philippines. Okay, so you can say taga UP ako. Or those who come from the University of Santo Tomas, you can say taga UST ako.
Now you can start practicing Filipino. In the comments below, introduce yourself by telling me your name and the country where you're from. Just substitute your own name and country in my own introduction. Ako si Christine, taga Philippines ako. Practice, practice, practice. See you in the next video where you'll learn about that single polite expression po.